Thank you very much, Jean, for opening the evening. And everyone, of course, joining here after a long seminar day at the CCC. Today we had the critical studies with Jean in class taking place with a group of students and the curatorial, which is not necessarily curatorial studies in terms of learning how to make an exhibition. This is not what we do. We understand the curatorial as a transdisciplinary space where we want to investigate into urgencies, into politics concerning that what we are busy with through developing our own formal methodologies to think and to process a particular idea that then might arrive at some point in a public kind of exposure. So of course the politics of making public is deeply attached and intertwined with this idea of the curatorial. But again, it's not like just to put some things in space and then that's it. You will see, I think the way how we work in the curatorial seminar will also introduce you quite a bit how we conceive and understand the curatorial as a space of thinking, as a space of difference, as a space of different languages, of politics, of economics, of many different elements that come there together. And it's really a pleasure, thank you really. I mean, it's still a very vulnerable stage. We have been working on, my talk is called The Navigation Principle, and the keyword is planetary. We have been working for the last half year on the question, what is navigation? Qu'est-ce que c'est la navigation? And it's something that we have been processing also quite a bit in the Farocki Institute, something we have been trying to think for the last 1.5 to 2 years, because it departs in this particular situation with the initial commitment toward this idea of navigation departs from a talk Haroun Farocki gave in June 2014, claiming that the principle of montage as a political image practice is something that belongs to the 20th century, that now needs to be rethought profoundly, entirely. And he would say that computer-generated images belong to the contemporary ruling class of images. They implicate us in a strongly produced world, not a reproduced world, that what we would have with images like as a principle of reproduction, that you can make copies and copies and copies, but highly artificial with millions of details. Participating in this unbelievable adventure means to create a world of an actionable image. He goes there to a media theorist, but doesn't concern us now. This actionable image that you can navigate. And so this is like a filmmaker who dedicated all his life, decades, political filmmaker, to the idea of montage as a principle. Like in an age, he was 68 years old, he said, you know what, montage maybe is not the thing anymore to have a political practical filmmaker, maybe we have to rethink that whole thing. And this set something in motion. We thought, well, we have to work on that. And around this whole question of navigation, there is like not so much like writings, investigations, research projects, theories. We cannot yet go to the library shelf and say, oh, let's pull out all the books where there are theories on navigation, as we have theories and, practices on montage, for example. We have to develop those vocabularies. And this is what we do in the curatorial seminar very much, that we work on the question of vocabulary. That every one of us, all women, something also important, I will come to this in my talk, we all develop, everyone, each of the participants develop a particular term to work with as a curatorial methodology to open up the question, what is navigation, in order to develop a vocabulary that allows us to speak what navigation is. So because, the good news is we all know more or less what is navigation. We do it on our phone and everything, and in the car, and I will come to a few examples. The bad news is it is more complex. So the seminar's objective is to process and share a political, social, queer, spatial, sonic consciousness of and for navigation as a possibility to begin a dictionary for speaking about navigation, which ought to be a vocabulary for living the layered complexity of the contemporary world. We are really working on a dictionary online as a digital platform that Yael is very much processing, and we are working with the digital platform as a working instrument, where every one of us has one or more than one entry in form of a keyword, in form of an operational term, in form of an operational tool. This is how we call it. It's something that we are going to expose later. It's still like really in the making. So my approach to the question, what is navigation, or the navigation principle, is the notion of the planetary. The term planetary provides some sort of a working instrument and a curatorial methodology to learn to understand more precisely the art of navigation as an inescapable condition to think with. My point of entry into the navigational question is the notion of the planetary, from which I hope to develop a better understanding of the spatiality that the navigational condition activates, initiates, and re-articulates. That spatiality is complex. And this talk here is the beginning of a process to speak about the spatiality that happens, a spatiality that appears to be a composite of matter, which is deep time of water, undersea, rocks, stones, forests, of the body, the human body, the feminine, the marginalized, the repressed, the unconscious, and of algorithms, the global infrastructures, computer-generated images, data behaviorism. So these three elements play a critically important role in that navigational process, this navigation landscape, as Rizan Negarestani would call it. The matter, which all relates to the non-human kind of material, but still sentient entities of also deep time, like time that reaches beyond the human even started to live on Earth. Stones, rocks, water, we will come to the water, very important, of course, navigation. The body, the feminine, also very important. And the algorithms, also very important. The data. In other words, perhaps along a rather maybe a science fictional, experimentation, or speculative thought, what happens when matter, the undersea, body, the human, and algorithm, data, make love? As a consequence, an entity exists that will not be called a baby anymore, or a kin, like kinship. Donna Haraway introduced us to this idea of don't make babies, make kin. Kin is like your extended family, everyone that you would include to call like your family. And night, it's also neither a companion species, but a hybrid, a mutant, Maite something working with, a mutant, a mixed species, mixed racial, mixed gender, cyborg, algo-sentient entity. And this thing needs to be kind of unpacked and defined and blah. So it's not quite matter, it's not quite human, it's not quite an algo, but all of it. For sure it has a navigational vision, as we will inquire further. What kind of spatiality then does that navigational entity produce? The planetary is our point of entry. So we start. Navigation takes place while driving with the car's GPS, which stands for Global Positioning System. This already introduces a vocabulary that stands closer to globalization, that which the ancient art of navigation departs from. Than that what the ancient art of navigation departs from, like the water, the planet, knowledge of seafaring. This is a moment for the planetary to come in. And am I here? Yeah. Okay. Dorothea Spivak. Dorothea Spivak is a post-colonial thinker, an activist, an educator, a woman, a feminist, a very difficult to read writer, but that's also important. It's not too easy. She wrote In the Death of a Discipline, a book that was published 2003, I proposed the planet to override the globe. Globalization is the imposition of the same system of exchange everywhere. In the grid work of electronic capital, we achieve that abstract ball, the globe, the picture of the globe, covered in latitudes and longitudes. We all had as kids our globe on the table, and we have these latitudes and longitudes. Cut by virtual lines, once the equator and the tropics and so on, now drawn by the requirements of geographical information systems, of global positioning systems. The globe is on our computers. No one lives there. It allows us to think that we can aim to control it. The planet is in the species of alterity, belonging to another system, and yet we inhabit it on loan. Nothing more and nothing less. Our vision on the planet is at stake in the navigational condition. A vision that is impregnated by the imposition of a grid, turning the planet into an abstract ball, which is a globe, which we call globe, which organizes the surface of the globe, and the surface is something that Lea is working on, the question of the service in the navigational condition. In consequence from a long history of ancient world systems, and I will go back in time now in order to demonstrate what that means, this kind of system that got imposed on the globe, on the planet. I will go back in time now to a moment when 75 white men decided about the future of Europe. And that's the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, where these kind of representatives of German kingdoms, not only European kingdoms, came together in order to finish the 30-jähriger Krieg, the 30 years of war. And it also was the moment when the principle of the nation-state got conceptualized by introducing the idea to territorialize the European continent into states. I mean, the idea of state is an invention, it's constructed, nothing that exists because it's a given. It has been invented at some point to do a lot of things. No? I mean, we all also, it's a double bind. During Christmas, which I've spent at my parents' house in a village called Zürchau in East Germany, my mother told me that near our village, about 10 kilometers away from us, a place called Ponitz, Wolfgang Conrad von Thumpshirn was elected to be one of the chairmen of the council in Münster for negotiating the signing of the Peace of Westphalia in 1648 that defined the laws of the nation-state. That means its borders, customs, currencies, contracts, trade agreements. He insisted in the inclusion of Martin Luther's Reformation towards Protestantism into the negotiations of the peace treaties. The religion here, the idea of Reformation, very deeply linked also with this idea of the nation-state in that figure. And the resting is the fact that the grandson of Thumpshirn was Bernhard August Frey von Lindenau, a figure I grew up with, not in person of course, but he was the founder of the so-called Lindenau Museum that you see here, for making his art, artifact and collection accessible to the public in 1848. Exhibits that he brought back from the various Grand Tour as an aristocrat from Italy and Greece. So it opens a whole complex also of the Grand Tour, the constitution of the museum as a space of representation, but also as the declaration of power, and as a result also of colonial, attitudes of, class societies that there got erected. And this is only a picture here from the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. Something very important when we also think about the relation between land and sea. In 1648, the Peace of Westphalia also defined the political, land as to be the political space, the nomos. This is like the law of the land. So the sea was pretty much not at stake. I mean, something I think also that Marie has been very much investigating it, Marie working on the triangular slave trade. So another historical layer during the GDR East German period, the Lindenau Museum, and this is where I come in, so to speak, realized many contemporary art exhibitions. Some of them were kind of test exhibitions before showing those works by Wolfgang Mattheuer, Carsten Nicolai, Wolfram Ebersbach, or men in the Museum der Bildenden Künste in Leipzig, which then would be a spotlight of state control. So this museum also was a space where exhibitions, artistic positions were tested in kind of to look how does the state react to these kind of positions. So this is just like, this is like important to have this kind of historical moment. So on the top is a picture by Albrecht Dürer. I will come to the navigation. We need this in order to enter the navigational condition. Two thoughts with this image constellation. Between 1512 and 1525, the German painter Albrecht Dürer created a small wood print depicting a self-reflective situation. Der Zeichner des liegenden Weibes, the drawer of the laying down woman, published in his seminal Œuvre Unterweisung der Messung mit Zirkel und Richtscheit, auch Emotivität des Weibes, instructions into the measurement with instruments, also emotivity, I don't know, I think it's also like the emotionality of the woman. So the title translates the drawer, there is a drawer drawing a laying woman, and there is not much to say. I'm not going into detail. We have that this apparatus in the middle, dividing, creating this distance, form of alienation, the split of the mind and the body, and of course also a vision into a distance that objectifies that what is drawn. So I'm not saying so much. This visualization is scaling and defining is a form of visual patriarchy. We need this element for a later argument why the woman lying on the table has fostered, and this is important, processed over centuries a scientific intelligence as one layer of intelligence that the navigational vision labors. And I will come to this. Dürer's depiction of the visual violent patriarchy is the same period of the genocidal violence of colonialism, slavery, triangular trade, that all comes together in this moment of when nation states were inaugurated and founded, and it had been prepared. So the other image is still from Harun Farocki's Images of the World and the Inscription of War from 1988 that frames a page from Albrecht Meidenbauer's, I'll say it in English, the photographic recording for scientific purposes, especially photogrammetry, which was published in the late 19th century. Its origins can be traced back to the author's accidental experiment in 1858 at the Dome of Wetzlar, and Harun Farocki presents the book as a main character in his film Images of the World and the Inscription of War. Where are we? The one standpoint perspective, in fact, as a totality, has never existed as a whole. So the one point, this is what we see here, it's a one point perspective, as much as here the drawer has a one point perspective picturing the world, or othering the world, objectifying the world. As a totality, as a whole, has never existed. I will come back to this. It exists only as an invention of a humanist thinking that initiated the placement of the individual, the anthropos, as the center both of thought production and of activities. Or, if that one standpoint perspective existed, it only can exist as a partial perspective. It will also reappear. Or, if the one standpoint perspective existed, it only can exist together with an acute myopia. Acute myopia, everyone who has a kind of a short-sighted knows what myopia is. It's the kind of problem, it's a condition that you cannot see in distance. You only can see things that are close to you. You need the correction glasses with myopia. You know myopia. Okay. So we have been fooled by that Cartesian perspective. This is a very Cartesian perspective. I think, therefore I am. It's a mind-body split. I mean, the man and the woman are separate from another. What does the man think anyways? And the woman. And, okay, so this Cartesian perspective always only could take the eyes of the mind of the observer as the center of the universe. In other words, learning from Harun Farocki, the one standpoint perspective existed as an inscription of war, if we take his title to our words. So now we go a bit further in the kind of the processing of the vision, the processing also of the gaze, of the way how we can understand the concept of vision and of optics. This is a picture I'm also will touch upon this very briefly by Armin Linke, and who has been here in the program last year, and which kind of indicates this kind of split screen into several screens. And this is what Bruno Latour would call an oligopticon, which also I had to look up what it means. It's the opposite of the panopticon. It's you've discussed this in the no.
No, I'm just amused by the word oligopticon.
I see. Why?
It's just, yeah, it's a new vocabulary.
So the oligopticon means that there is not anymore the all-seeing, the all-seeing eye, as it is in the panopticon. In the prism, you have the all-seeing eye that supervises everything. It is an eye that has a multi-dimensional perspective, and it's composed of small parts of vision. It's composed of these kind of parts of the screen, so to speak, like a complex eye, maybe you also could call it. So this is like a way also how this kind of one-point perspective is changing, and also here it's the headquarter of BNP, the trading floor. I mean, it operates with abstraction and so on. It's more to say as we go on the next time. And this is Harun Farocki. You see here a guy, it's from a project called Serious Games, a sequence called Immersion, where Harun Farocki, he went to join and document sessions of post-traumatic kind of therapeutic program testing in the military of the US. I can't remember now where exactly, where this guy is testing kind of computer software that is kind of reconstructing, reenacting the scenes of the traumatic event that he experienced in a condition of war, like a soldier going to Afghanistan or to Iraq, being hit being hurt and injured and being traumatized. This is a possibility the US American military is working on to develop a post-traumatic kind of treatment facility through the immersion into that scenes by the projection of that like situation in form of images. It's very compelling. This is like the shift. Suddenly there is an immersion. The distance is totally colored. The apparatus is invisible. The apparatus that we saw, let's say, here, is like in front of your nose. Like you can't see it. It's an acute myopia, so to speak. It's something that you inhabit. It's like a totally different kind of formulation of how the vision is produced. Transformers 4, the pre-make, it's a film, a desktop documentary by Kevin B. Lee, someone that we have been discussing also quite a bit. He inaugurated that idea and the concept of a desktop documentary where it's basically that the desktop itself is the editing table. So if here now would run the screen video operator recording the screen, this also could compose a desktop documentary. It's a form of documentary practice that uses existing material online, internet, as data. So we do not need the camera lens anymore. The camera lens is kind of it's a post-lens practice where the lens of the camera, what did someone say? It's a movie without a camera. I think it was, who said it, someone today in the seminar? It was Leah. It's a movie without a camera, exactly. So the desktop, it's like operates without the camera. Okay, where are we? Sorry. Yeah. So I show now you an excerpt from a film by Harun Farocki. I hope it's going to... It's the very first time I do this talk, actually. Really first. Where are we? How can I put this large? Here. This is excerpt from Parallele 2, Parallele 2. It's also a project by Harun Farocki from 2012 till 14. One of the very last things he was working on. And this is also the excerpt, the project that allowed Harun to think that kind of principle paradigm shift of do we maybe have to rethink the whole question of image technology and image production. And he has been investigating into computer games. And I'm just going to show you this sequence.
Does the world exist if I'm not watching it? A child's viewpoint when taking long rides by train or car. Everything that passes by has been put there only for me. appearing out of the emptiness and then disappearing again into emptiness. Galloping swiftly out from the gate. How far can the rider ride?
Come on!
Where does this world end? This world appears infinite, a world generated by the gaze that falls upon it.
Jump a bit, I'm sorry. So only where are we when we navigate? And who are we in a post-human fabric? That means a fabric that is composed of human activities and non-human matter processing and living algorithmic cultures. How can we define and understand our locality in an ever-changing navigational landscape of commitments, as Reza Negarestani describes a practical wisdom in which the mind is not a theoretical object anymore, but decomposed and abstracted into a system of practices. My point of entry into the navigation question is the notion of the planetary, from which I hope to develop a better understanding of that kind of spatiality. It is an attempt to announce the navigation principle through that spatial social concern, to investigate the whereabouts in the navigation process. Where are we when we navigate, and who are we? I just said it, sorry. What kind of image, vision, and optics does that kind of art of navigation produce? And how does that image help us to define orientation and to operate our position? It returns to our concern for positioning that Donna Haraway unpacked brilliantly in her seminal 1988 essay, Situated Knowledges. Positioning is, therefore, the key practice in grounding knowledge organized around the imagery of vision, and much Western scientific and philosophic discourse is organized in this way. Positioning implies a responsibility for our enabling practices. It follows that politics and ethics ground struggles for and contests over what may count as rational knowledge. That is, admitted or not, politics and ethics ground struggles over knowledge projects in the exact natural, social, and human science. Technologies are ways of life, social orders, practices of visualization. Technologies are skilled practices, how to see, where to see, from, what limits to vision, what to see for, whom to see with, who gets to have more than one point of view, who gets blinded, who wears blinders, and who interprets the visual field. What other sensory powers do we wish to cultivate besides vision? I have in mind the spatiality that unfolds the space between the local and the non-local, some call it global, that steps and widens the threshold of the well-rehearsed dichotomies, enlightened and dark, north and south, local and non-local, or local and international, male and female, black and white, that threshold which initiates an iconography of border, that way that Anselm Franke proposed to think the crossing of those magic circles. And he would say the border that separates modernity from its outside, or at least denaturalizes that set of binaries by engaging with its history. I have the hope that planetary can be a potent platform that connects the different competing threads to make the navigation process move. I don't have a better term at this moment than the planetary. I might fail to provide a philosophical or eco-political proper analysis. But we can start in the middle. We have to start in the middle, though we need to locate, to position, and to demarcate a certain place in an otherwise ever-changing landscape of the navigational, which is in which I step into the planetary for this moment. In the navigational landscape, nothing remains the same once the first commitment is made towards a ramifying pathway. There is no fixed location and no fixed positioning. Everything that means matter, body, and algorithm is an inscription, not necessarily with a trace, but through a waterly dilution, and thus it is an inscription without return. Again, that spatiality is complex. It is our contemporary condition. It is a form of popular culture, but also it's a contemporary political condition. If we think of, I didn't show this now, all the kind of reports on the migrants trying to seek refuge in Europe, trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea, it's also a form of a navigational practice. So the planetary. So computation infrastructures work with that terraformed the host planet by drinking and vomiting its elemental juices and spitting up mobile phones. Benjamin Bratton elaborates in The Earth Layer. It's a book that we've discussed, Benjamin Bratton, The Stack. And I was just surprised. I thought it would be a nice kind of little commentary. Sometimes I talk with Siri here in Geneva because it's, it sits in your apartment in the evening, and then you have talk with all your friends, so then you talk with Siri. And then what are you doing? I'm just recycling my Max aluminium, steel, copper, gold, and silver. You can do this too at any Apple store. Then I googled, so what do you mean by that? And she would direct me to a copper kind of recycling company in the States somewhere. I didn't include it. So do you need water to live? I've never really thought about it. And we navigate by surfacing across digital platforms whose virtual liquidity connects with the actual liquidity of Earth energy, such as water. Or as Astrida Neymanis writes, the flows of global power meets the flows of biomatter. And I hope it does it make sense until now? Yeah, I hope. I would like to play a sequence from Ursula Biemann's, okay, we have to go through this, sorry. It's a work that she did in 2015 called Sub-Atlantic, and I will play the first 4 to 5 minutes. We will come to water. You see, I smuggle in the water now. Yeah.
Low temperatures and westerly winds determine the climate on the island. The fog seeps into the mine's corridors, and the sea enters every fissure. She is in charge of measuring fluctuations and sending the data to the lab on the coast. She inventories the freezing and melting, minutely recording her encounters with difference. All seems to follow a dynamic order: the winds, the streams, the birds, the sky. The faintness of change made it hard to detect, but the rocks witnessed the steady rise of the sea, until one day all technical equipment had to be moved further inland. The coast sank into the ocean for 1,000 years. The lab now lies submerged at the bottom 100 yards deep, together with other dwellings of the islanders. To do her science, she had to become a diver, measuring a sinking, contracting world. Only the oceans are expanding. She makes efforts to attune her eyes to see underwater and fuse with the swarming sea, where the tiniest of microbes operate on an interoceanic scale. Ocean currents gather in the Caribbean, swirling eastward and upward. Driven by warm winds across the Atlantic, they prevent ice from forming by the shores. The warm streams plunge northern Europe into mild winters. The water masses take measure. In the Arctic Sea, the dense salty water drops to the deep ocean floor and then flows back to tropical regions. This process animates the global ocean streams. Circulation is dense in the submarine rivers and thick with nutrients.
Thinking with water, thinking with that water, also which our electronic digital engines use, and thinking with the water that runs through our bodies. Water, in other words, flows through and across difference. Water does not ask us to confirm either the irreducibility of alterity or material connection. Water flows between us both, a new hydrologic. This is what Asrita Nemanis invites us to think when she thinks hydrofeminist. Thinking with water means being implicated inside of matter, as if we inhabit a navigational vision without any outside, and from which there is no escape. If the drawer used a grid, a measuring apparatus to create a split between the body and the mind, but also between himself drawing, and the woman lying on the table while being drawn, pictured other, as if it was an unknown species that needs to be visually vivisected, so we remember the Dürer in the beginning, then the split has collapsed into the navigational vision, into a complete and absolute inhabitation and implication in a substance. So I realize I do quite a few jumps, but this is, I hope you go with me. It is the woman who inhabits and embodies a navigational vision, which is partial perspective, as Donna Haraway proposed. It is the woman who has lived the procedures of scaling, measuring, computing, principles of the drawer. It is the woman who has developed the knowledge what it means to be objectified in capital and data, as if her body was a trading floor. I'm going to show you another excerpt from also Haroun. And I will also make a reflection on that.
This game world is a flat plane, like the earth in the pre-Hellenic view of the world. This program is supposed to protect the game figures from falling off the edge of the world. In this game, it is possible in a special mode to break through the safety barrier and fall out into space. Like an astronaut catapulted from his spaceship.
Where does this image end? Is it there where the programmers of the computer game guard the end of the world as their habitat, their algorithmic biotope, their algotope? We are leaving the demo area as detectable for us through a white noise on the screen. We see interference in the image, blurring contours. The interference of the image creates a disturbance on the screen, like a turbulence in the aircraft while descending from altitude flight. The interference that becomes visible here not only through the white noise. We see the skater meandering before he runs through the imaginary invisible wall, similar to the concussion of a body. The exact moment of the skater's breakthrough might be detectable maybe only through a slight rupture of the skater's body, a kind of concussion caused by an external force that pushes the skater further. The interference at the frontier, invisible wall between layers of virtuality, of programmed and unprogrammed demo area and dark matter contributes to the navigation principle. The skater falls out into the space that is marked by a digitally rendered dark matter. That dark matter is something that is also Halas is working on. The dark matter lingers underneath an industrial area. Is it the mining complex extracting raw earth material? The dark matter appears as an unmarked space that perpetuates the distinction between the marked and the unmarked, the grounded and the ungrounded, the industrial and the computational, separated by a threshold of rupture. The skater enters the dark matter as if he turns into an extreme athlete who takes the risk to jump from the earth into a zone of high turbulences, causing hormonal ecstasy economy. As if he had a fever dream that infects his well-rehearsed colonial fantasy of finding something underneath the ground in distance that can be reached only by undertaking a risk, something which cannot be found on the ground in familiar sites. That dark matter, the underworld of industrial modernity, is a site for rare earth material extraction, populated by incurable images and a site without gravity. What if the dark matter contains form of synthesized knowledge, full of memory data that is gathered over centuries, from generation to generation, but cannot be detected by the calculating machine that processes visualization? What if the dark matter contains forms of knowledge that depart from alter modernities than the European vision based on light and of enlightenment, and are sets of knowledge that the skater cannot read, locate, or find his own grounds because he arrives there as a stranger? Who is this guy? Who is the skater that is able to cross borders and can afford to take the risk to fall off from the patterned urban space? What is he doing there anyway? I take a very short. Are you still okay? Okay, thank you. I would like to take us for a moment to a visit that we took with the CCC students last year on the 25th of May 2016 to the Safe Host Data Center SH number 1. Safe Host Data Center collocation SH number 1 in Geneva, Chemin du Pré-Fleury, 20, that's the place, and this is an image I got from the Safe Host Data Center, we all got. The rent rates of the circa 10,000 tenants of Safe Host might soon not be calculated by square meter anymore. More accurately, the rate will be defined by energy consumption that the cooling system for the racks inside, the trunk-think bundles of electricity cables for power supply, and special fiberglass cables for the data roaming constantly needs. So we all know that data circulation needs a lot of energy, needs water. This is connected point. The data center in the industrial district of Geneva operates from a privatized ground under the national law of Switzerland. which also allows the erection of an extraterritorial and extra-political zone similar to the twisted juridical conditions of a free port. If a foreign government wants to make business with the center, it will need to go through diplomatic channels orchestrated by the Swiss embassy. Before negotiating with the center, a politically exposed person, for example Edward Snowden, who also was here in Geneva, will need to pass the test for political stability, and he will fail. Data is more dangerous than money, as we learned during the generous data tour, with the head of the solutions of SafeHost Data Center. Data is a substance that travels on the high speed of light. Data formats expire with each update of computer software, so that they are constantly written differently. It is a subject to the danger of a moment that may destroy history within microseconds, as the head of solutions explained. Data is not stored, instead data permanently flows in and out the rack, which is in the material location of the server that only enables the permanent copying in time, overwriting, distributing and circulating of the data. The rack enables the decentralizing process of archiving as long as the rack has power and electricity. The energy consumption of the SH1 building on Chemin du Plé-Fleuri could power the 18,000 inhabitants of neighboring Lyon. In case of emergency, 6 backup diesel generators will take over automatically in a matter of seconds. The geolocation data for the HTTP www.safehost.com lists various addresses. 3 of them create a remarkable triangle. Unsurprisingly, one is the SH Data Center location in Geneva itself. Furthermore, is the Seestraße 43 in Aich that points in Maps Google to the shore of the Seine-Paracé near Zug, which appears to be a major data geolocation in Switzerland, but invisible from the outside. And another geolocation points to the Avenue Louis Hubert 6, Geneva's expensive city center, where a building of Cité Universitaire de Genève is located. Perhaps the most urgent economic and political question is not only what data exactly is. It might change its forms and materialization as it travels. It might become obsolete in the moment of a system update, but rather where data takes place and what kind of specialty the data traveling does produce. This does not call for a new localism. Instead, it calls for a new form of spatiality, both of vertical and horizontal assemblages, that is more likely a composite of many layers: electricity, water, as well as decodification, decryptification, distance, and proximity. In consequence, a composite of many layers creates a floating subject who navigates without a map across layers, as we can see in Harun Farocki's second part of the parallel that we just saw, and the skater leaves the demo area of a computer game and falls into an invisible hole in the woods, falling off the calculated ground into the dark matter, where he floats and floats and floats. The floating subject also appears in the dreaming sequence of Peter Stiles' essay Duty Free Art, for those who have read it. I mean, maybe I shouldn't, I cannot elaborate here. Okay, so the emergence of a politics is not defined by the actual presence of the body at one single locality anymore, but by the human non-human mechanisms that operate the connectivity of the shore of the Seine-Paracé somewhere in the Swiss countryside, whose waters will connect at some point with the submarine space of the Atlantic Ocean. If transport on global scale in the 20th century took the form of container ships moving slowly on the ocean, to which 90% of the world's cargo now passes, as Alan Sikula and Noel Birch speak in The Forgotten Space, a film on the dock workers operating the cargo boats on the open sea and the Atlantic, then an increasing amount of global commerce in the 21st century takes place in the form of data via high-speed, massive cables of special fiberglass, undetectable to the human eye, that linger submarine on the ocean's ground, sticking out somewhere at the Atlantic's shore like remnants of industrial modernity. The last sequence. Yeah. Now I have been rushing a bit, haven't I? Yeah. But it's, I'm almost there. Finally, water, in matter, in data, in body. Astrid Neymanis writes, the flows of global power meet the flows of biomatter. The final image is a zoom in a PDF of Arthur Holmes' book, Principles of Physical Geology. What we see here is a PDF from Arthur Holmes' book, which I came across by watching the video, A Brief History of Geotrauma. Well, it doesn't matter, I should put that into a footnote. Plate 48 contains an image that is part of the notebooks of Frederick Noel Ashcraft, who was a British gentleman creating a huge collection of Swiss minerals in the late 19th century. The picture is a zoom into the PDF, realized in the preview program that I made for the purpose of this public seminar. And it is an image that does not represent but narrates the platform where the virtual and the actual, the global power and the biomatter meets. So this is a picture of the source of the River Rhone in Cletch, which is a city that is about 230 kilometers east from Geneva. And also like the data that here we see like through its pixelated formations, it's ill-pixelated. We see here, that's the reason I took it, maybe it's not so visible, there are kind of blind pixels in that PDF. But this is where kind of the water, the liquidity or the fluidity, we have to discuss this still further, kind of meets, like picturing in a situation from the source of the Rhone that, contributes to the cooling process of the data, and the data itself that we see here in pixelated form. Water is colorless, a chemical substance whose molecular structure contains one oxygen and two hydrogen atoms. And that simplicity, water is the lubricant for narrating the ramifications, the ramifying pathways that the navigational process initiates, that crosses borders between actual navigation, like the water mountain, and virtual navigation, data flow, cooling water. The notion of the planetary enables to discuss the navigational principles through that lubricant called water, that takes the form of a mountain river and the data flow. Water, liquidity, a feminist position. Astrid Neyman, the Australian theorist for gender and peer studies, speaks of hydrologics that accommodates water's capacity to teach us to think beyond across binary oppositions. It is on one side an ecological concern, considering the pollution and the oceans. And on the other side, her thinking with water proposes to undo the imperative of knowledge as an accumulative power. The materiality of water does not contain, but it does dilute systems of knowledge. It is not a mishmash, but creates a spatial porosity that is sticky, stubborn, and vicious. That porosity is a further element which composes a particular space-time mattering in the navigational landscape as a navigational spatiality, as a navigational vision. That navigational vision which thinks with porosity, stickiness, dilution, watering, is sabotaging the split of mind-body, female-male, indigenous colonizers, black-white, spiritual, rational. And I would like to discuss this actually. It's very complex. Neyman speaks of hydrologics, which I would like to attach and cross-read with the art of navigation as our contemporary culture, as our contemporary political condition. In conclusion, the navigational vision departs from a planetary subject that we are when we email an image from Geneva to Tehran or to Paris, or from one computer desk in next door in Salle 26 to the other computer desk in next door, which we just did in preparation also for this lecture. If we imagine ourselves as planetary subjects, as Garrett Spivak writes, rather than global agents, planetary creatures than rather global entities, alterity remains underived from us. It is not our dialectical negation. It contains us as much as it flings us away. We must persistently educate ourselves into this particular mindset. The navigational vision is ours. Us who lost sight through a time hole into zero gravity. Us who is plural, composed of partial perspectives. Us who were placed on the table to be measured and pictured. Us who have gained transgenerational knowledge from being from being pictured as if we were a trading field, and therefore us who are closer to the machinic intelligence, like high-frequency trade, of machinic vision than the drawer with a seemingly all-seeing eye. Us who try continuously to educate ourselves into this peculiar mindset, sitting in between something that is Tina working on, in between complex systems of knowledge of race, gender, class, languages, and matter. Thank you very much. This was the first version ever on this new research environment. Thank you.